Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline!
Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
Strap yourself in and get ready.
And here we go!
The leaders in fantasy football are incoming, giving you the ultimate insight to help you win your leagues and dominate your mates. You're now listening to the Insight NFL Show with your hosts, Guns and Maverick.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go!
Let's go! Go!
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Insight Fantasy Sports Podcast. It's a bit different tonight. It's basically a SuperCoach Guns podcast. In fact, not just basically, it is. Here you are with both admins from SuperCoach Guns. Pat, how are you going?
Yeah, not too bad. Big week in NFL so far, and we have a game tomorrow to look forward to.
Yeah, is that the it's not quite Marshall and Lattimore and what's it called? Mike Evans. I thought it was Saints Bucks, but no, it's Falcons Bucks. That sounds right.
Falcons,
Yep.
Bucks.
Yeah, that'll be a good game. I think the Falcons will struggle in the air, but we will cover that fairly soon. We'll quickly cover a key aspect in our start sits this week, and that is injuries. There you go. We high value production here. So let's have a look at the Vikings. TJ Hawkinson is nearing a return. Apparently, it's suggested he's probably going to return in week 7 to week 8 and take a few weeks to get up to his 100%. So that's good for those stashing him on pup. I know I have in a couple of dynasty leagues, and I've been rolling out starters to the tune of Taysom Hill, Hayden Hurst, and Noah Fant at tight end. So I'm looking forward to that. Do you have any TJ Hawkinson shares?
I think I have a couple, and that was not well-informed picks, but I've stashed him, and I'm waiting for the return. I cannot wait.
Yeah, look, and to be honest, as soon as he's in the lineup, he'll start just because, or maybe not the first week, but the second week he'll be straight in because
I'd imagine.
it's grim at tight end. It's grim. Rashee Rice, there's some suggestion that he's avoided an ACL tear. Now, that comes off the back of it not being confirmed in the initial scans. So, usually, from what I've read and heard, usually you can tell an ACL straight away. They couldn't tell. Well, they could tell in the initial test, but then the scans and they didn't came back and they weren't sure what it was, which usually suggests it's not an ACL. Apparently, an ACL is pretty obvious in a scan. Wouldn't know. But point is, it's possibly a bone bruise or a PCL injury. So could be a month out still, and maybe a little short-term IR, but not season ending. So I hope you haven't dropped Rashee Rice in your redraft leagues yet, because he might be back. As a Chiefs fan, I'm sure you have at least one share of Rashee Rice, surely.
Yeah, I've got plenty of shares of plenty of guys in the Chiefs, and it was obviously pretty bad to see Rashee go down on Monday morning. And it looks pretty bad, and all the reports, I guess, on Monday morning and Tuesday were it's ACL, what happens with the Chiefs offense, etc., etc. But yeah, over the past couple of days, there's been improving reports. I'm not sure what exactly it looks like at the moment, with some extra rumors that the Chiefs might be in the run for a Devontae Adams or a Amari Cooper. So I guess we'll watch that space.
It'll be interesting. I've also heard DeAndre Hopkins' name thrown around a little bit too. So I'd struggle to see how the Chiefs don't go after one of these guys. Personally, I think for a salary cap perspective, it's DeAndre Hopkins. But Yeah, interesting times ahead. Nick Chubb. Now he has been getting active on his Instagram. A lot of Batman areas from him, which usually suggests he's nearing a return to play. And boy, am I looking forward to him being back in the NFL. Uh, it's going to be a slow ramp up probably for Nick Chubb, just because although the running back play has not been fantastic, it highlights how important Nick Chubb now is to them. Because if Jerome Ford could come in and step in and establish himself as a clear RB1 in his team, which he hasn't really been able to do, uh, then he Nick Chubb wouldn't have been as important. But now, like Jerome Ford's not a three down guy. We've been saying that all along. And Deonta Foreman's not got much left in him, so it's up to Nick Chubb. So I mean, obviously you're going to activate him on pup, but what's your expectations from Nick Chubb?
Um, it really depends. I mean, the Browns sit at 1-3 on the year, and you've got to sort of make a decision how much does he make up of your offense, I think. And obviously he's a key part, and the Browns offense isn't quite working as how it probably should. But it'll just depend. I mean, they can go very conservative, but then you could also look at the Browns just throwing in the towel early in the season, which yeah, I'm expecting big things quickly from Chubb to see where the Browns are at in their offense with Chubb in it and active in it. And then I think they'll take it from there, seeing how it works.
He's a bit of a litmus test to see how they approach the rest of the season. So, like, if he's not got it and that injury really was a career killer, well, then you're sort of looking at, well, we need to tank here and start again. So we'll trade Amari Cooper. We won't bench Deshaun because what do you gain from benching him? Nothing, because it's Jameis Winston. Like, you're going to tank for someone like a Shador Sanders, a Carson Beck, um, even throw in Jalen Milrow after his last couple of games. Interesting comment here. NRL Physio has said that Nick Chubb will never get back to what he was health wise. No, I think we both expect that, but 80% of Nick Chubb is like way better than what Jerome Ford ever will be. Like, it's harsh, but he's just not been very good, Jerome Ford. Even 25%, even 75%, Ben, like, it's better than Nick Chubb. If not, Nick Chubb would be better than Jerome Ford. So yeah, it doesn't change much in my mind as long as he's still like a above average NFL running back, which I'm sure he will be because he was amazing before the injury. Uh, Not concerned there. There's a couple more. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, he had that concussion. He's still in a bit of doubt, sort of leaning toward 55-45 for him playing this week. Jonathan Taylor, unlikely to play, so fire up Trey Sermon. And then what else have we got here? David Njoku's probably a 60-ish% chance to play. Yeah, there's a couple more things here, but you can read them in your own time on social media. The one final one here, I suppose I've got here is Anthony Richardson. Looks like he will be playing in week 5. Now, that's probably enough of the injury news. Let's look forward to this week, week 5. And as we talked about at the top of the show, Tampa Bay are playing the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I think the first point we should talk about here is the Bucks have only let in one passing touchdown all season.
Yeah, the Bucks secondary has been, I think, the standout for their defense. I mean, their defensive line has been fine, and their linebackers as well. But Nakobe Dean and their other corner, which name escapes me.
What? Jamal Dean?
Jamal Dean. What did I
Yeah,
say? Nakobe Dean.
Nakobe.
My
He's the
apologies.
Philly linebacker, isn't he?
That's correct. My apologies. And the other corner, which his name also escapes me, has
Yeah, I
been
don't know.
fantastic this season. Um, it's really tough to get a gauge on this Falcons offense. They're not firing as they should be. They're 2-2. It's it's just
Mm,
tough. I mean, with the Bucks already look like such a solidified team. They understand what they're doing on offense. They know their identity. They run the ball well. They pass the ball extremely well. Baker's just taken it to a next level this year. And
yeah.
yeah,
In interesting news, Antoine Winfield has been ruled out of week 5, so that might let them up a little bit. I think in terms of from a start sit perspective, which is well, what this show's all about, right? Drake London's a perfectly fine start. Like he will do his thing. Kirk Cousins will get him the ball. I have no problems with that. I would be hesitant to start Darnell Mooney, but with that news of Antoine Winfield out, probably would. Otherwise, I'm sitting Falcons pass catches if possible, especially Kyle Pitts. And I just think it's going to be, they're going to have to rely a lot on the ground, the Falcons, which is just perfectly good news for Bijan Robinson and maybe even at a pinch, Tyler Algier. Tell me, if you needed a desperate flex option, would you be looking to Tyler Algier this week?
Uh, yeah, I would. He ran the ball really well last week, and I've just pulled it up. He had an average of 7.5 for his 8 carries of 60 yards. Um, it's tough because you base it off last week and you think, right, there's some solid production available here. But you also look to the fact that the Bucks are pretty good against the run, and he's also then got to compete with Bijan, who had a less than he had 4 catches, 46 yards, which is all right, and then he had 7 carries for 28 yards. So you
Mm.
can look at it both sides of the coin. It's I probably would, and I could sort of see a similar role being played by both running backs this week.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, obviously Bijan's a start. Algier's not a terrible option though. I don't think. Um, the Falcons' defensive line hasn't been fantastic. In fact, they let in 3 rushing touchdowns last week, which means, you know, Rashad White and Bucky Irving. Oh, yes, please. I'd happily start both of them. I understand that it's a bit of a split backfield, but Rashad White's got his pass catching, which is going to give him a high-ish floor. And Bucky Irving's been doing a bit of goal line stuff, which is going to give him some touchdown upside, which we think is on offer here. Um, let's look at this from another again a start sit perspective. If you're picking between Bucky Irving and Tyler Algier, which backup are you taking?
I'm taking Bucky Irving. And I'm taking Bucky Irving because, like I said before, I think the Bucks have more of an idea of what they're doing than the Falcons. I think, unfortunately, for Rashad White, he's slowly going to get phased out of this offense. Sort of similar, I imagine, to how Clyde Edwards-Helaire was phased out of the Chiefs offense when they drafted Isaiah Pacheco, because Bucky Irving looks all that much better, I think. I think there is obviously some receiving upside with Rashad White. He had 2 catches for 35 yards last week, and Bucky Irving only had the 1 catch. It's weird because the Bucks' offense, in terms of pass catching weapons, if you exclude the running backs, are just so good. You got Evans and Godwin, who are just so elite. So there's not often all that much share for the running backs, but when there is, it's just extra points. I'd be taking Bucky Irving, in short.
Yeah, I mean that. I think I agree there. You look at what Bucky Irving's been doing. His yards per carry have been well above average, and very well and truly clear of Rashad White. Um, I mean, this is just a very disappointing situation if you have to play Bucky Irving and Tyler Algier as your starting running backs or equivalent. That would be yeah, that sucks. What if you have JT and Pacheco and have to play Bucky and Tyler? What then? He follows that
You
up with
suck it up.
delete app. Yep, or delete app, either way. Um, the Jets and the Vikings. Now, this game has a bit to it, I reckon. I think Aaron Rodgers, after the absolute stalemate that was that trash game with the Broncos last week, um, I think he's going to come back with a little bit of venom. I think Garrett Wilson needs to, fire up. He needs to really show why he's been so highly touted for the last couple of years and have his third year breakout. But who's stopping the Vikings right now, man? Far out.
The Packers almost did. They left their run too late last week. The thing about the Vikings is their offense is so gelled, and I think that's what we'll see with some of the matchups, especially early on in the season, especially with the last game we just talked about. The Jets are still figuring things out. Obviously, they had Aaron Rodgers injured last season, and he didn't attend training camp this season. And there's still a lot to gel for the Jets. I mean, their running game's a bit of a shamble, and their passing attack isn't what you would have expected with Alan Lazard being the big feature of the Jets passing attack.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the Jets can, because I expect a bounce back, but the Vikings are just, their offense is gelled, and their defense hasn't really lost a step since losing Daniel Hunter. So it's just no one really at the moment.
Yeah, it'll be a look. It'll be a close game. I mean, we're getting a few comments here. Sam Darnold revenge game from my usual co-host, but smash starting him. Hey, I watch him throw 3 picks and no touchdowns now that he said that. So that's just how it works. Interestingly, not on water, just lemonade, but it's not vodka like you suggested as well. So, well, it could be. It could be a bit of both. The Vikings are letting in 277.5 passing yard per game this year. I think you fire up all of your Jets wide receivers if you like whoever you have from the Jets and their wide receiver trio. Mike Williams is starting to get a bit more involved. Garrett Wilson is a really good matchup for him, I think. And Alan Lazard's been a touchdown machine for the Jets, if you can say that. So I have no problem starting them. But on the flip side of that, the Vikings' run defense, very stingy. Not interested in, like, if you have a lot of really good options, you might be able to afford to sit Brees Hall. Certainly not starting Braylon Allen. But Brees Hall does have the pass catching. He will have to rely on it pretty heavily. But I mean, I'm okay starting him because it's Brees Hall, but it's not ideal the form that he's been in lately.
No, and I don't think anyone else expected Braylon Allen to have as much of an impact on his production as what he has. I think Braylon Allen is also very good, but it'll be interesting to see how they manage the split week to week. Yeah, it's been a bit tough for Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson, respectively. They've just got to step it up a bit. I'll tell you what, it helps if you're quarterbacks at training camp.
It does, and it also helps if your offensive coordinator isn't Nathaniel Hackett. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
too.
yeah. And the Jets, they're on average they're conceding only 150 passing yards a game this season. So they've still got a hell of a defense. Now, obviously, Bo Nix only passed for 60 last week, so that sort of takes the air out of that stat a little bit. But even then, it's not going to be. It's going to be at around 200 at best. So I'm not going out of my way to start Jordan Addison. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, you start every week no matter what, right? But Jordan, unless he's injured. But Jordan Addison, I've got no problems benching him this week. And yeah, there's not really many other relevant pass catchers on this Minnesota team. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, without Hawkinson there as well, I'm more than happy to sit Addison this week.
yeah. Let's have a look at the Panthers and the Bears now. The Carolina Panthers, they have a terrible run defense. They've let in 7 rushing touchdowns this year in just 4 games. So, what does this mean? It's DeAndre Swift time, people. He bounced back last week, almost from the grave, might I add. Like 1.8 yards per carry. Then you go out and you have like 16 carries for almost 100 rushing yards and a massive breakaway touchdown. Then you throw into that this matchup here, which is the best running back matchup you can get. This is um DeAndre Swift is a smash start this week. Like you just need to play him. Um and even better for Swift owners, Shaq Thompson, middle linebacker for the Carolina Panthers, tore his Achilles and he's out for the season. And so they're going to have a rough time stopping the run. I think Caleb Williams won't have to do very much this game. I wouldn't mind starting Roshan Johnson either because he's still there or thereabouts, particularly with some goal line stuff. But yeah, I mean, fire up DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It it's interesting. I mean, the one thing the Bears don't want to do is look at this game and think we'll take a back seat because as lucky as the Bears have been with the fact that the Panthers were that stupid to trade them that much to them, and then they got Caleb Williams on top of that, and etc. The Bears are also not that far removed from being what the Panthers could be. They've put all the pieces together. They have, but they're 2-2 still. Williams has been he's
Slower.
ebbed and flowed. He's been slow to start the season, not as quick as what everyone would have anticipated. So they've just they've got to play like they played last week against the Rams. And I know the Rams is a bit of a different situation because they've got nothing on offense, and even some of their defense is injured as well. They can't afford here to fall into a trap of it's going to be a walkover game. It helps that they're such a weak team and there's no Shaq Thompson anymore. But you got to hope Swift is good early, and then from then the Bears will be able to should be able to win that game anyway.
Yeah, that's like I don't expect much from Carolina's defense this game, but I like it could be a shootout, and that would be good to see because Chicago have led in 484 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns in the last 4 games, which means they're going to be riding the back of Chuba Hubbard. I mean, he has had quite the last 2 games with Andy Dalton. I think he's something like the RB3 since Andy Dalton took over, which is ridiculous to think about. I think he's got a 28 and a 21 in PPR league, so he's on fire. Uh Again, yeah, another must start, Chuba Hubbard, and well, I reckon this could be quite a shootout. This game, looking forward to that one. Let's look at the Commanders and the Browns now. Obviously, talk of the town is Jaden Daniels, absolutely lining up the league right now. Um, and in what can only be deemed an interesting fact, the uh, Cleveland Browns, there's the team. The Cleveland Browns have conceded a rushing touchdown in each of the last 3 games. Now, Brian Robinson's been managed during the week. Austin Eckler's coming back from the concussion. We think Brian Robinson will be fine, but Jane Daniels is a dual threat quarterback. I reckon there's a Jaden Daniels rushing touchdown on offer here.
Oh, there usually always is with the way he's playing at the moment. They've only punted the Washington Commanders once in the past 3 games, which I'm sure is a stat everyone's seen. I mean, the offense that the Commanders have is just electric, and there's no other word for it. I mean, you have a dual threat quarterback with a proper stud number one receiver, and then you have two very serviceable running backs that are both, Brian Robinson's a bit more on the run side, and then Austin's obviously a bit more of a pass catcher. Like, this offense will cause the Browns so much trouble. They scored, how many points did they score last week again?
42.
42 points against the Cardinals. And I mean, the Cardinals are meant to be all offense, and they only scored 14 points last week against the Commanders' defense. So I struggle to see the Browns getting anywhere close to them this week.
Well, I will throw a stat at you on the flip side of that, and that is that the Commanders have conceded 10 passing touchdowns this season in just 4 games. Now, for me, if David Njoku is fit to play, obviously you're going to start him anyway because of the nature of the position that is tight end being absolute cesspit. But Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, I'm starting both of them with confidence this week. Commanders have a shocking defense. I don't know what the heck happened with the Cardinals last week on offense because Marvin Harrison should have gone nuclear. I'll just put that out there. But he didn't. And Kyle Murray really didn't do much either. It's for me, it's gonna be that the ground game is gonna die out for the Browns. They're gonna be forced to pass. They'll be trailing. Amari Cooper could have a monster third quarter. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking will happen. Tell me if you're looking at. We'll come to this a bit later. What are you going to do with Jerry Jeudy though? Would you start him this week?
That's a tough question. I will be honest with you. I have, since the day he was drafted, I haven't been the biggest of fans of him. It's just a thing. There's no real basis behind that, I'll be honest with you. But he obviously led the team last week in receiving yards. I don't know. I think you look, and yeah, the Commanders' defense isn't all that great. But when the Commanders' offense gets on such a roll, their defense doesn't really matter. And it'll be such a momentum-based game, I think. I think the Commanders should win, but it's just a matter of... I don't think I would be starting Jeudy. I think it will be such a momentum-based game, and I think the Commanders will run away with it quickly, and you won't be getting the fantasy points that you want out of Jeudy.
Yeah, fair enough. There you go. Our first split decision of the evening. That's nice and clear for the viewers. That's fine. Now, do you agree with me when I say sit the Browns running backs? Like, it's very hard to predict what's going on. Deonta Foreman's the goal line back, but they're not running on the goal line. And Jerome Ford's basically playing as a wide receiver because he's just catching more passes than what he is running nowadays. So, what do you do there? They've abandoned the run game.
Well, I just don't like having players from the Browns on my roster, if I'm being honest. If I had to, it would probably be one of the running backs and it'd be the guy who's injured. However, I wouldn't be touching any of the Browns running backs this week, I don't think. They played the Raiders last week, and Jerome Ford had 10 for 58, and Deonta Foreman had 4 for 2.
Yeah.
That doesn't excite me at all, and I don't see there being a massive upgrade in production this week.
Yeah. Now, when you say 10 for 58, like it's 5.8 yards per carry, naturally you think, oh, that's good. But it's just that it could be so much more. Because that, like, I don't know for certain, but there's not much offensive line personnel change since early last year when Nick Chubb was fit. Like, it's a good O line. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, 10 for 58 is pretty good. But you look at it, that's 6 fantasy points. I know he had a decent pass catching game, Jerome Ford as well, which helped. But I just look at this team with such distaste.
Yeah, they
I
haven't.
just
They're
think,
just yeah.
the Commanders will be just the Commanders are here, the Browns are down here, and I think that will show.
Yeah. Speaking of two teams that are like right down here, the Pats and the Finns. Now, we're not going to stay too long on this one. Ramondre Stevenson's basically lost his job. 4 fumbles in 4 games. Lost his last 2 fumbles in his last 2 games. So it sounds as though Antonio Gibson will start at running back for the Patriots. Still no clear wide receiver one after 4 weeks, so none of them start still. And for the Finns, there's not a lot going on offense. You start Devon A-Chain. That's just about it. I don't think there's much more to add there. Anything that's stood out for you?
About these teams, no.
No.
The Pats have been. I mean, I don't know what else you expect from the Pats. I mean, you're going to get 14 points a game from them. Maybe you're going to get a stupid touchdown they somehow score, and then it's going to be field goals. I think. I mean, maybe Antonio Gibson's worth a start if you have to. If he's going to start at running back, he had 3 catches for 67 yards last week as well. So there's some sort of receiving upside.
Yeah.
I mean, the Pats are just there to watch. They got dismantled by the 49ers last week. And then we had the unfortunate viewing party on Tuesday to see 2 Monday night football games. And they were, well, not both duds. The Seahawks and Lions game was pretty good, but the other one, Dolphins Tennessee, was rubbish.
Yeah, that was hard to watch.
And I mean, you say start Devon A-Chain, but he had 10 carries for 15 yards. It's just, Miami's just so dead at the moment because there's no tour, which is, weird to say, but they just don't have another competent quarterback. If they had a competent quarterback there, it wouldn't be that bad, but no disrespect to the Pro Bowler, but
Yeah, I was about to say, it's Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley. Absolute GOAT. I can't remember if Trevor Lawrence made a Pro Bowl, so we won't use that as my segue. But the Jaguars Colts, this shapes up to be a bit of a slinger. Like, defenses aren't great. The ceiling on offense is very high for both teams. Both teams haven't really hit that ceiling yet either. But against some dodgy defenses, maybe this is the game we see some pretty monster games. For me, I'm looking at starting all the key fantasy relevant players I've got. So guys like, pardon me, Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Evan Engram, and Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, of course, for the Jags. And I'm looking at starting Anthony Richardson. Sounds like he's good to go, as we mentioned earlier. Trey Sermon sounds like Jonathan Taylor's out, so fire him up. I'm looking at starting Michael Pittman, and I'm looking at starting Josh Downs. I feel like this is going to be a points fest.
yeah, I don't really see a world where it's not with where their defenses are. You look over sort of what the Colts did last week, and they had a decent day on the ground. And even with Joe Flacco quarterback like Pittman had 6 for 113, and Downs had 8 for 82 and a touchdown. And I think those two sort of will go again with Anthony Richardson. Unfortunately for Alec Pierce, he had that great first game. And then Pittman has been just the stud, and Downs has been, like the past 2 weeks. Yeah, I don't see a world where it's not a points fest. I think Richardson has a good chance to put some of those stupid throws of his behind him, and it make it comfortable enough for him to easily win this game.
It could be like, look, I say this as a Anthony Richardson fan. It could be an absolute monster game for him if his hip's good to go. Because when he went down with that hip injury, like it was a walk-in touchdown. It's like he was on the red zone, he was just running, he had so much space, and then his hip just gave in. Like it was there for him. Um, and he was also starting to play pretty well. As like he wasn't really turning he wasn't turning the ball over. I get it was a small sample size, but he was 3 from 4, 70 yards. I don't know, few rushing yards, maybe 20. All in the first quarter. So he was starting to click. But I mean, look, it's start everyone. Um, Now, obviously, the big talking point is that Jonathan Taylor's unlikely to play. Trace Sermon, how do you view Trace Sermon this week?
I think the Colts have. I can't be exact on the number, but probably definitely a top 10 offensive line. I think they have
Hmm.
all the right pieces to have a big day on the ground. Provided Anthony Richardson is fit, that can also play a part. And I would be starting Trace Sermon, definitely. I think it's not quite plug and play, is it? Because Jonathan Taylor is one of those upper echelon running backs. But it could almost be a bit like a San Francisco 49ers situation with Jordan Mason.
I mean, and we've seen how well Jordan Mason fills in. Trace Sermon's had a couple of games where he's been given, like he's filled in for Jonathan Taylor before and done pretty well. And sure, I think Tyler Goodson will feature as a bit of a pass catcher, but Trace Sermon I see as the real main running back here. Like there's a reason they didn't draft a running back. There's been a few guys that have come and gone from their roster that they really do trust Trace Sermon. So I'm I'm more than content with Sermon as a play this week. The matchup's good too. Texans Bills. Now we look at this game. You got CJ Stroud coming off. Did they lose last week? No, they just won to the Jags, didn't they?
Just one.
Yeah, just won against the Jags. You've got Josh Allen coming off an absolute uh, thrashing by the Baltimore Ravens. So Josh Allen's here to prove a point. CJ Stroud's keeping on, and well, I mean, Nico Collins is on fire. Can we expect much of the same from Nico Collins, or is it going to be a bit quieter this week?
I think Nico Collins has a great chance to back it up this week. I think you sort of look at the Texans and you probably think everything's okay, which it probably is, but there was that loss to the Vikings, and obviously you then go, well, the Vikings have been playing that well. In terms of a winner, I don't know, but there's no reason why Collins can't keep continuing what he's doing. I mean, I get that there's lots of weapons, but he's so clearly the stud number one, which, it was either Diggs or him, and he's so clearly the one, and he's playing so much better than Diggs, statistically. And then if you go and watch how they play, I think Nico Collins is another. There should be points there for this week.
Yeah, he's having an insane start to the year, and I hope it keeps going for him because he's a gun. I sort of think that I think we're looking at another points fest, in my opinion. Like, sure, the defense is like Buffalo's defense isn't great. They've just lost Von Miller for 4 games as well, so their pass rush takes a hit. The Texans' defense is good, but it's not been as consistent as they would have liked. However, the big win for the Texans is that they get Joe Mixon back this week. Now, I don't need to tell you what running backs did to the Buffalo Bills last week, but you know, there was 56 points scored by running backs in fantasy football last week. Now, Joe Mixon's a noted 3-down back for these Texans in his 1.5 games he's played, but he is the 3-down back for them. Every down back, sorry, rather. I don't care that he's returning from a multi-week layoff. You have to start Joe Mixon.
Yeah, there's no real other option, I don't think. And that's what makes me sort of think that the Texans will be that much better this week, because obviously he played such a pivotal role in week one, Joe Mixon. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately for the Bills, they lack a couple guys. I mean, you, I think that Josh Allen will still go big. If you look at the pattern, I believe it was QB1 week one. He was about QB28 week two, QB1 week three, and then probably close to QB28 last week as well, in and around there. So if you look at the trends, he's in for a big week. But
Yep.
I don't know how the Bills get it done this week.
Well, it would be if the Bills win, it's because of Josh Allen and Josh Allen only. Well, I suppose James Cook could have played a role, but he will play a role. But if the Bills win, Josh Allen's put up a monster fantasy score. That's just how the Bills operate now, which is good for fantasy because the Bills are a very solid team. Um, Now let's look at the Bengals and the Ravens. Now this is the game that was deserving of a primetime slot, but it hasn't been given it. Why is Pittsburgh and Dallas on at primetime, yet this game or the Bills Texans game not in that primetime slot? I'll never know. But
I do. Look at the
let's
records.
yeah. Well, yeah, but gee. I understand the records, but come on, the Dallas Cowboys in primetime? Ugh. Um the Bengals and the Ravens. Now, it's a bit of a contrast. I get that the Ravens are 2-2, but a lot could be different from there. They've had one bad game, maybe. Uh and they only just lost to the Chiefs by quite literally a couple of toes.
Mm.
So there's a they're having a better season than what their record suggests. And Lamar's having a heck of a year. Derrick Henry's on an insanity run of touchdowns. Justice Hill's improved leaps and bounds again, and you've got the emergence of Isaiah Likely, kind of, and of course Zay Flowers is keeping on, keeping on. I suppose the toughest start sit question of the week is what do you do with Mark Andrews? I couldn't get through it. I tried. I tried to keep a straight face. Um, I will ask you a hard question. Would you cut Mark Andrews in redraft?
Would I cut him? It's tough to say. He's looked so much of a non-factor in their offense. I mean, he had that drop last week, which I remember, which could have easily been 10, 15, 20 yards. He's just been disappointing, really. I mean, there's no other word for it. He's been. I wouldn't be surprised if heaps of people have already dropped him, and I wouldn't be surprised if people continue to drop him because he's got no points last week. No points.
Yes. No points. He's done a Kyle Pitts.
I'm sure everyone saw last week the image of whoever had Mike Gesicki as their tight end, and then they were playing a guy who had Mark Andrews, and Mike Gesicki won the matchup that week, 0.1 points compared to 0. The tight end
One
was
catch.
such a cesspit.
Yeah. One catch for -9 yards for Mike Gesicki. Far out. Yeah. I suppose following on the topic of tight ends, are you starting Isaiah Likely this week? It's been a quiet couple of weeks, but this sort of feels like one of those matchups where he could go not massive, but he could have a very productive day.
I would be. I think I understand there's been couple quiet weeks, but you look to, and obviously sorry, let me start again. The Ravens are obviously such a ground reliant team, and that's how they get into the momentum of games. I think I think I definitely would start Isaiah Likely. I expect there to be something a bit more this week from him.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about tight ends this year, Isaiah Likely something like the tight end 6, and he's had 3 single-digit scores outside of his week 1 game. That's the reality of tight end. It's trash this year. If you have any sort of consistency there, you probably have a top 3 tight end. So you got, I guess Jake Ferguson missed the game, but Jake Ferguson's been possibly the most consistent tight end this season for fantasy. Dallas Goedert, wild to say, but he's not far off either. And I'm sure there's a couple of names who I've left off the list. I think Njoku will be up there in terms of consistency as well. But obviously he hasn't really played. He's only played 1 game, so there's that. On the flip side of things, the Bengals offense is starting to click. Back-to-back games with 30 or more points. Jamar Chase is really hitting his straps. T. Higgins is getting better. And Chase Brown. Chase Brown is taking over this backfield slowly but surely. All of a sudden, it's Chase Brown's backfield. Now, are you starting Chase Brown over Zach Moss?
Yes. And I'm saying that purely because, I mean, obviously the Bengals offense has looked leaps and bounds better than it did in week 1 and week 2. And in week 3 and 4, Chase Brown was the lead rusher. Chase Brown also picked himself up 2 touchdowns on the ground last week. Not all that involved in the pass catching. Only 2 catches for 12 yards compared to Moss's 4 catches for 27 yards and a touchdown. That doesn't really bother me all that much. I think it'll be interesting. I mean, the Bengals are just getting better and better, but the Ravens are such a good team.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of a Bengals capitulation.
Interesting.
I just wouldn't be surprised, but I'd be very safe in saying Chase Brown over Zach Moss.
Yeah. I think that's probably it for that game. Let's look at okay. Wow. We can be quick through this one too. Broncos, Raiders. Wow. So obviously Devontae Adams not playing. I'm not even going to talk about the Denver Broncos. There's nothing to talk about there. Sit everyone. Okay, we've covered the Broncos. Trey Tucker has been an interesting revelation for the Raiders. I mean, obviously, with Devontae Adams clearly wanting out, it's time for someone to step up. Jacoby Myers is kind of a safe missionary wide receiver too, I think. I don't think you're ever going to see him be an alpha wide receiver 1, but Trey Tucker kind of has been. Like he's kind of stepped up and put up some really good numbers the last couple of weeks. He was in our waiver wire chat and podcast, whatever you call it, I don't know, on Monday, but he was highly talked about. I hope he went out and got him. I think because Jacoby Myers has the reputation of being the wide receiver 1, he'll get the Pat Surtain treatment, which, as we all know, is basically congrats, you're scoring less than 10 fantasy points today. That's been the case for all of this season. It will continue to be the case because Pat Surtain is a stud, which then frees up, naturally, Trey Tucker. Now, he's a bit of a deep threat, and I kind of wish Aiden O'Connell was in at quarterback for him because that's when he'd thrive. But Gardner Minshew's there. He's still getting him the ball. Tell me, how do you approach this matchup if you own Trey Tucker?
I would be starting.
Yep.
Just it's a bit like starting if you have to. It's watching the Raiders' offense is certainly interesting. I mean, they scored 20 points on the Browns last week, and I don't know whether that speaks more to the Raiders' offense or the Browns' defense. I don't really know what it speaks to. They lost to the Panthers the week before that, and somehow beat the Ravens the week before that. All those games not going over 30 points for them, as in they haven't been scoring more than 30 points. It's just the Raiders and the Broncos. I mean, if you look at last week's games, the Raiders and the Broncos are just. There's clearly not going to be a lot of points involved on offense. You start Trey Tucker, I think it's just. It's
There's not much, is there?
You wish you were somewhere else, I think.
Yeah, this is why Red Zone was invented, so you could only watch the good parts of this game, which would be like 3 highlights, really.
Although then I might be tempted to watch a game that's not that yet.
Yeah, yep. Get past that game as in its entirety. Not touching the Raiders running back, Zamir White's dead. Alexander Madison can't really hold on to the ball if he's given more than 10 carries, so you can't go there. And well, I mean, obviously Brock Bowers is Brock Bowers. He'll keep going. I have no concerns of him. Brock Bauer, yep. Now, an interesting game, in division game. 49ers Cardinals. We've seen Brock Purdy really break out of his shell a little bit this year. Like Brock Purdy was very stiff pocket passer last year. Distribute, let them do run after the catch, and that's how the 49ers went so far. But with Brock Purdy playing the way that he is, it's a shame that the rest of the team's letting him down because Brock Purdy's getting out of the pocket. He's creating where he wouldn't last year. And well, for starters, CMC's got dodgy Achilles, so he's just sitting in Germany or wherever he is now. Brandon Ayuk didn't train in the preseason; he hasn't turned up. Debo's a bit injured. Kittle's a bit injured, and the best skill position player is the backup running back Jordan Mason. So it's very hard to get a read on these 49ers team. You do start everyone though on offense, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's another case of you need to show up to training camp for certain members of the 49ers. Brock Purdy's been playing really well. There's no doubt about that. You would have seen at some point last season the stats with and without Brandon Ayuk and how much Brock Purdy suffers. And you can take all of this season as if it's been without Brandon Ayuk because he's been an absolute shell of himself. Just being honest. Yeah, you start everyone on the 49ers because a team like Cardinals, I imagine there's 40 points, mate, for the 49ers.
Yeah, it's not a good defense, is it? It's a
You
grim
saw what the
defense.
Commanders did against them, and you'd say on paper the 49ers are a far superior team than the Commanders. And they scored, 44, 45 on them last week. So,
Yeah,
big game.
I mean, start everyone, right? Now, on the flip side of things, the 49ers defense has been okay. Hasn't been as ironclad as what we're used to it being. Again, got no problem starting Marvin Harrison or Kyler Murray. Or Trey McBride. I should throw him in there. James Conner, he's a bell cow, so I'm not concerned. They have a lot of high value offensive pieces, don't they? Like you throw Marvin Harrison, you throw in James Conner, Trey McBride. Like these are all guys that went in the first 5 rounds of mock drafts or just drafts as a whole, even. But outside of these key pieces, you're probably not starting anyone else in this game.
Probably not. No, I mean, The Cardinals only attempted 22 passes last week.
Mm.
I imagine it's a higher but sort of similar number this week. Kind of did well with 18 carries for 104, and then they had Trey Benson, who had 9 carries for 50 yards. The Cardinals this year were meant to be all offense, and if you look from a fantasy points point of view, that is still true, I guess. But you're looking for a bit more from guys like Greg Dortch, and probably, if you drafted him, Michael Wilson, just a little bit more of something.
Mm.
You obviously hope that James Conner keeps up his production, maybe get some pass catching action after this week only having 1 catch for 9 yards as well.
Yeah, like Michael Wilson, right? He had a couple of solid he's had a solid target share, but it hasn't translated into actual points. But I still think you just give him the week off in your starting lineups if possible. I mean, if you have to play him, he's not a terrible option. But uh, yeah, I wouldn't be rushing to play him this week. Um, Another dud or one-sided game, we think. Probably the Seahawks and the Giants. Now, obviously, my boy Kenneth Walker, number 9, 3 rushing touchdowns last week. He also did a front flip for a first down on top of a bloke, so that's good. Yeah, Kenneth Walker against this Giants team. Oh wow, it could be a cricket score for him.
Yeah, and it's concerning because you look at the Giants' defense and you say the weaknesses in the secondary, but yeah, it's the Seahawks offense will be very good to watch this week, I think. And unless, I mean, the only real hope the Giants have is in Malik Neighbors. And even then,
He might
earlier
not
in the
even
show,
play.
you said, yeah, he might not even play. It's just, it'll be a one-sided game. It should be a one-sided game. And I expect Kenneth Walker will go large.
Yeah, it's hard. I struggle to see um, Kenneth Walker leaving this game without a touchdown because and DK. I'll throw DK to that mix as well. If the Seahawks turn up, this will be a blowout. If they don't, it could be a bit of a really hard game to watch. I got to say. But surely this loss to the Lions sort of just wakes them up a little bit. Like they got off to that dream start, need to pull their heads in, keep going on with their good form, defensive. They need the defensive line back as well. I mean, the whole starting lineup on the defensive line was out, but yeah. On the Giants side of things, Malik Neighbors, Devin Singletary is a bell cow and an every down back, so you can start him basically against everyone. Uh wouldn't play Daniel Jones. The strongest part about this Seahawks team or the Seahawks defense at the very least is that secondary. Like you throw Devin Witherspoon, you throw in Tariq Woolen, um, Julian Love. I don't know what the situation is with him. He left the game with a quad injury, and Rayshon Jenkins as well. You put all those 4 in there. That's a big 4. Um, Daniel Jones probably going to lead this game with more interceptions and touchdowns, I feel.
As he usually does. Yeah, the Seahawks will probably it's probably a bit similar to what that 49ers Cardinals game will look like, I think.
Yeah. And I suppose to an extent, this Packers Rams game, to round out the Monday morning slate of games, or early morning slate of games rather. The Green Bay Packers, I mean, Jordan Love back really does bolster that offense. It bolsters Jaden Reed as well, who's put up some superb numbers with Jordan Love this year. Jordan Love, he had 389, 4 passing touchdowns. Yes, there was 3 picks. That's because they were slinging. Pardon me. That's because they were slinging it. And this Rams team is just so hit by injuries. Kyron Williams is the last thing left on offense, besides, of course, Matthew Stafford. If they lose Stafford, or if they lose Kyron Williams, like they should start tanking because they haven't got much left really. Stafford keeps taking hits deluxe.
Well, at least for Kyron Williams, there's Blake Corn behind him, but there's nothing behind Matthew Stafford, unfortunately. We've seen Stetson Bennett play at the NFL level in pre-seasons, I guess, and he has
There's not
been
much there.
underwhelming, to say the least. I mean, you look at how the Packers played last week, and you're like, yeah, they should win this game, but you also look at the picks. I understand their game plan and how they fell behind so quickly and what they needed to do to get back in it, which they almost did. But there's a chance the Rams can get some early points. It'll be tough, but there's a chance the Rams can get some early points. Maybe their defense sticks with them. Maybe. But this should all be Green Bay Packers, unfortunately.
Yeah. What would you do with? Obviously, we've seen. Oh, I think this is his name, Emmanuel Wilson, the backup running back for the Green Bay Packers. He's starting to get a fair bit more involved. Um, if you're desperate, I suppose I'll put this question out there. I'll frame it this way: would you start a lot? What Emmanuel Wilson? I think it's Emmanuel Wilson. It might not
It
be,
is.
but yeah, okay, there you go. Emmanuel Wilson or Tyler Algier.
Tyler Algier, probably. I'll make
Yeah.
that simple just because you've got Josh Jacobs. I know you then go, well, Atlanta has John Robinson. But Tyler Algier also does have a 1,000-yard season under his belt. He's proven he's done it before. And there's still more of a 1-2 about the Falcons' backfield than there is with the Green Bay backfield. I understand Jacobs last week had 9 carries and Emmanuel Wilson had 8. Very similar. But I think that was probably because they fell behind so early and one thing led to another.
Yeah.
It'd be Tyler Algier.
Yeah. And of course, the big waiver pickup this week was Dontavian Wicks with Christian Watson missing a fair bit of time. If you've picked him up on waivers, you're gonna have to start him. I feel this matchup definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, last week we saw him have 5 catches, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, Jalen Reed is there, and then it's him. It could be interesting to see how sort of the game script goes because obviously they had to throw it heaps, and that may be a bit of inflated numbers. I mean, Jordan Love did throw the ball 54 times.
Yeah, and Dontavian
So,
Wicks had 13 targets as well. You add into that.
yeah. So it could definitely be either or. You'd 100% have to start him just based on form, I think, and matchup.
Yep. We now move to the first of the final 2 primetime games. So Steelers Cowboys. I mean Justin Fields. I said it on Monday night. Justin Fields is having the season I was hoping Anthony Richardson would have. But I mean that connection between Fields and Pickens is really picking up here. And I, for one, am really looking forward to seeing that in front of me on primetime.
I mean, yeah, you look at the stats last week, and Justin Fields had a pretty good game. He threw the ball 34 times, connected 22 times for 312 yards and a touchdown, not to mention 10 carries, 55 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His connection with Pickens has been great. Pickens had 7 for 113 last week as well. So a narrow loss to the Colts, like the Steelers could be 4-0.
Exactly.
You look to this week to the Cowboys, and the Cowboys have been underwhelming. Don't let the win against the Giants give you any hope. They sure they might win this week, and that's not out of the question. There's still problems with Dallas.
Yeah. And there's like what they've lost a fair bit this week. Micah Parsons isn't playing, I don't think. I think they've lost Brandon Cooks for a few weeks with a knee infection. So it's getting a bit ugly for the Cowboys. It's quite literally Dak and CD Lamb. Rico Dowdle's their RB1, and it's not a pretty RB1. Uh, there's no one there to take the job off him, and that's the only reason Rico Dowdle has the job. Like, he's not impressed. He's just been the best of the worst, you know. For me, in terms of start sits, I'm looking at starting quite literally on the Cowboys side, just Dak, just CD. And Jake Ferguson, of course. He's just an assumed starter now. And yeah, that's it. On the Pittsburgh side of things, Najee Harris, Justin Fields, George Pickens, and well, I suppose I'll ask you this: what would you do with Pat Frymouth? Like we're clinging on to everything we got at tight end. Is there a little bit of a matchup there for him this week?
Yeah, I think so. With the amount that Dallas is missing, I think there's a chance that the Steelers. I imagine that the Cowboys are the favourites, but I reckon you'll still see some decent offensive output with the Steelers. Frymouth, just to remind you of last week, had 5 for 57 and a touchdown. I think you can rule out any doubts of questionable quarterback play at this stage. Fields has been very consistent, and I don't see any drop off in production from Frymouth.
Yeah, I think you have to start him. Particularly if you've got a bit of some question marks at tight end position. So I'll frame another question at you involving Pat Frymouth. Kyle Pitts or Pat Frymouth this week?
Pat Frymouth.
Oof, yeah, okay. Yeah. That's gonna hurt a lot of people. Just swallowing your pride and benching Kyle Pitts for Pat Frymouth. Like that's oh yeah. Because you're talking about in the same draft, like Pat Frymouth was a late third round pick, and then Kyle Pitts was drafted fourth overall. It's a generational tight end. So it's like
The coaching
trying to,
issue, I think.
yeah, and it could be more than a coaching issue now as well. Like maybe Kyle Pitts is just a bust.
Maybe. It's just, you'd hope Raheem Morris would have given him a bit more of a chance, and it doesn't look like he has, unfortunately.
There's more to this, I suspect. As it for Kyle Pitts to really like he had a solid rookie year and then he's vanished ever since. Like there's more to this. Now the final game of the week or the round, the Chiefs and the Saints. There you go, got my words out. It's a tougher matchup for Alvin Kamara. There's no questions about whether you start him or not. Of course, you start him because it's Alvin Kamara. And Chris Olave is, of course, a start. Now, the question does lie in what do you do with Rashid Shaheed? Obviously, he's been a bit of a deep threat. That's his fame. But on the flip side of things, uh, he did have 8 catches last week, and it was more on the short to intermediate routes. So, what would you do with Rashid Shaheed?
I would start him because I have a
Yeah.
big problem with the guy on the Chiefs defense, number 27, Shamari Connor. And he almost lost the game for the Chiefs in week 3 against the Falcons. Week 3 against the Falcons, is that right?
Yep, that would be.
And he did not play very well against the Chargers either. They struggle. I mean, McDuffie is the elite corner on that team, and he will probably keep Chris Olave relatively quiet. That leaves Chamari Connor on Rashid Shaheed, and the Chiefs have had numerous problems with other guys, excluding McDuffie, in man-to-man coverage. And we know the receiver Rashid Shaheed is.
Yes, he thrives in men coverage because he can separate very easily. And then, I mean, there's no one at tight end. We think Taysom Hill's going to miss this week. If Taysom Hill was playing, I'd say play him just because you like the game script, not even the game script, the play calling could just be fluky and there could be a massive play there for him. But we don't think he's going to play. They don't really throw to their tight ends anymore, the Saints. So Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, don't care. On the Chiefs side of things, I mean, we've seen the rise and fall of Carson Steele, the duality of man, if you will. Um, he's gone from 17 carries for almost 80 yards against the Falcons to 2 carries, a lost fumble, and a loss of job against the Chargers. It now seems to be Kareem Hunt time. Uh, First of all, being a Chiefs fan, how good is it having Kareem Hunt back in Chiefs uniform?
He's looked pretty good, hasn't he? I think that was always sort of going to happen. I mean, against the Falcons, Carson Steele was going to start, and Kareem Hunt was already in the practice squad earlier that week, I think it was, and he was always going to get elevated up to the normal squad for last week's game against the Chargers. You've got to think that the Chargers' run defense is similar to the Saints' run defense. I imagine the numbers across the board, if you have a look at them from the Chiefs running backs last week, will be relatively similar. I don't expect Carson Steele to play a massive role. He will be the fullback for the rest of the season, as he was meant to be at the start of the season. And Kareem Hunt has looked very good. I think it was what it was expected, and I think you'll see similar output. Maybe there's a touchdown for him this week.
And then I guess following on from that, you're starting Kareem Hunt?
He'd be a RB2, RB3 guy for me.
Yeah, so pretty well, like a very safe start in reality. Kareem Hunt. The Chiefs wide receivers are interesting, aren't they? Because there's not many of them left again. You've got Xavier Worthy, of course. Now I traded him away during the week. I got Tony Pollard in return. I thought just capitalizing off that value that Xavier Worthy might have being the wide receiver one for Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, I threw in a couple of other little bits and pieces, but you know, I think that now's the time to trade away Xavier Worthy. I don't think he's someone who, in his rookie season at the very least, will handle being the number one receiver or number two receiver for Patrick Mahomes, but that's what he's going to have to be. How well that pans out, I don't know.
I think you're looking again at similar stats to last week. I think the Chiefs will probably struggle on offense early. Losing Rashee Rice is incredibly unhelpful. And the Saints, at least in the past, have pretty good defense. They've got obviously Marshall Lattimore and a pretty good, if not one of the best linebacker cores in the league. With everyone doubling Travis Kelce every week and Xavier Worthy being probably matched up against Marshall Lattimore, it leaves guys like Noah Gray. Maybe there's some work for Justin Watson. But apart from that, I expect Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy to still put up numbers on. It's just, I think they'll almost be force fed the ball.
Are you telling me that Juju Smith-Schuster's not going to have 8 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown?
I, I don't know how involved he gets in this week. It'll be weird to see. I don't think so, but then again, I wouldn't be surprised if so.
Yeah, I mean, it's not much there, is there? In the wide receiver room, like Xavier Worthy's got to deliver now. Like there's a bit of pressure on him. He's got to handle a wide receiver one workload. I don't know if he's that sort of player. I feel like he's a Rashid Shaheed style guy, but not the Rashid Shaheed we know now. The Rashid Shaheed we had last year, which is a pure deep threat and boom or bust. Right now, he'll get there. I'm sure he will, but right now I think he's a bit raw for that. Um, who's your tip in this one? I mean, it's the Chiefs, isn't it?
I think you just have to. I mean, with the way the Saints played against the Eagles the week before last, and then they lost to the Falcons, you don't. You look at how they played the first 2 weeks, and how much do you still value that after their past 2 weeks' performance? I mean, I imagine it's a Chiefs win.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we've covered all of the games. We've sort of covered start sits as we've gone. We've covered injuries. We've done it all for you as per. Quick plug. We at SuperCoach Guns opened up a Patreon. Was it today or yesterday? I can't remember. I think it was
I think.
today. Yeah, today. Or yesterday. Yesterday. Yeah, you're right. Yesterday. But yeah, we're going to be doing some Big Bash stuff on there. We're going to be doing some NRL stuff on there. We'll still be involved in Insight, of course. But this is how I don't know, we've been doing a lot of free stuff for a heck of a long time now. We're going to see what, if we set up a Patreon, what's out there. We'll be recording a podcast for that as well, Patreon exclusive. So go check it out. I think it's pretty cheap, $5.50 a month. That's a pretty good rate, up personally. But yeah, like go check that out. There's not much on there now, but when Big Bash Supercoach opens, like we'll be going one a week, ideally. And yeah, that'll be good. That'll be really good. Anyway, thanks for listening. Pat and I will be back on Monday night to review week 5, I suppose. It'll be off the back of a long weekend. That'll be, how good's a 3-day weekend, man? Far out.
Very good.
Very good. Well, I think we'll call it there. So thanks for tuning in. See you on Monday. And yeah, all the best with your fantasy football lineups this week.